Hi, my name is Alex Williams, founder of the New Stack, and you are listening to the New Stack Analysts podcast. Each week, we look at application development and management at scale. HPE is the sponsor for this week's episode of the New Stack Analysts. HPE helps some of the world's largest companies run their IT operations. The company is also making significant investments in the container ecosystem. It recently made an investment in Mesosphere, the maker of the data center operating system that orchestrates containers for both Linux and Windows. You can learn more about HPE at hpe.com. Now let's get to the show. Hi, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here for another episode of the New Stack Analysts. Today we are here with Omri Gazitt, Vice President of Product and Services at HPE Cloud. HPE is a sponsor of the New Stack, and we're very happy to have you here, Omri, today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. Glad to be here.
Also joined by my colleague and co-host for the show, Ben Ball, who produces our ebooks and is a big part of our team here. Ben, thanks for joining us.
Always glad to be here, Alex.
Excellent. So today we are going to discuss a topic that I think is relevant, really this transformation that we're seeing. And the topic really is about transforming IT into cloud superheroes. And I think that really speaks to a larger discussion about this space that we're seeing emerge, where we're starting to see, the emergence of these new platforms and these new ways of thinking about how traditional IT works with developer communities. But before we get started, Omri, I was wondering if you might be able to tell us a little bit about HPE today, where you are, what you're working on, and just give us an update.
Sure, absolutely. One of the things that's really exciting actually about this role and this business unit that we have around cloud is not necessarily in building out, a brand new multi-billion-dollar business for HPE, but really teaching all of the existing business units in HPE how to navigate, how to adjust through the cloud transformation as well. And so, as you know, we sell a whole bunch of gear to enterprises. We sell servers, we sell networking, we sell storage systems. And for that to continue, for that business to continue, that has to be relevant to what our enterprise customers are looking forward to, which is rather than buying disaggregated gear, they want to go buy integrated systems. They want to go buy hardware and networking and storage with a software stack that allows it to behave as an elastic utility, if you will, elastic infrastructure. So cloud is core to the transformation of our enterprise group, which is the group that is responsible for selling servers and networking gear and so on. Cloud is core to our enterprise services business. We run IT for a large number of Fortune 500 companies that basically entrust HPE to run their data centers for them. And that, you call that traditional outsourcing. Well, every single one of those customers, they want to figure out how they can get cloud services from us as well. And likewise with software, the same exact thing. We're going through a massive transformation in our software portfolio to make that read on and be relevant to an age where developers are building software in the cloud. So making those available as SaaS offerings, making those into APIs that developers can use, that's a massive transformation of our software portfolio. And really the cloud group is kind of at the center of all of that. We're really driving the platforms that basically are contributing to all those go-to-markets for HPE.
I have a question for you. Curious about the role of the CIO. And historically, the CIO has been really mandated with making the infrastructure move faster, making IT move faster. Now we're seeing this new age of the developer emerge, and we're seeing these developer cultures emerge. So how are these two forces now playing out in the enterprise?
That's a great question. Really, when we look at the number one imperative for CIOs today, probably 5 or 10 years ago, it was always do more with less, right? Like basically, we look at you as a cost center, and we want you to do things more efficiently, CIO. So please go do that. And now, the biggest imperative for the CIO is to remain relevant for their business units, right? Because their business units really need that agility. They need to be able to go faster. And so the CIO has to have a way to provide a self-service environment where the business unit, the developers that work in each of the business units can improve their offerings very, very quickly and deploy at web speed multiple times a day as opposed to once a quarter or once every 6 months. And at the same time, maintain some of the invariants that the business has to live by. So, the biggest two obviously being compliance and security. With security, we see that as, again, the number one issue that CIOs have to deal with today. It's become a CEO issue. It's not just a CIO issue anymore. It's not just CIOs that get fired for security breaches, it's CEOs that get fired. And so you have these two forces. On the one hand, the CIO is really responsible for making sure that the company as a whole doesn't get into trouble. And at the same time, they have to make their environments as friction-free as possible so that developers that work in the business units can get their job done. And that's exactly what is in front of them. And in order to make that transformation, they really need to go put themselves in the developer's shoes. They need to live the life of a developer in the business units and really embrace that developer culture. So the CIOs that we see that really navigate this most effectively are the ones that really start living in building their own internal applications in a cloud kind of way, and take the lead in doing hackathons for the larger views, and really kind of are visionary in terms of the platforms that they put in front of business unit developers, so that they don't lose relevance.
Well, I have a sort of follow-up question to your answer there. I'm kind of interested in hearing more about CIOs stepping into the developer shoes and playing a more active role there and kind of seeing into what issues they're facing. You mentioned hackathons as a good example. Is there anything else that you can think of that really might give CIOs insight into these kinds of issues? Yeah,
so one of the things that we see quite a bit is CIOs that have an application portfolio, and obviously they're going to be very pragmatic about what they do with that application portfolio. Some applications have zero ROI in rewriting. Some of them are mission critical and have to be maintained as pets as opposed to rewriting as cattle. But there's a substantial number of applications that they look at and they say, these applications could really use modernization or transformation. And so being selective about the set of lighthouse wins that they focus on is typically a very big deal for them. So oftentimes they'll have a very emblematic application that everybody in the organization uses. They'll go through a transformation cycle with that application. They'll be able to generate some level of success there, and they'll get a set of developers internally very excited about adopting more of a DevOps operating model for that application, adopting an open source-like contribution model where developers from around the company can go enhance the application, adopting source code control systems like GitHub and build systems like Jenkins and so on, kind of what people do every day in the web world, in the SaaS world, and really kind of bringing those practices in-house. And once they have some level of excitement that gets generated, that's an enormous tool for them to be able to, kind of really regain credibility with the broader business units. And then the other thing that we see them do quite often is they get proactive in terms of standing up developer environments that really look like, Heroku for your private cloud, right? Be able to, have developers just focus on the code as opposed to focus on all of the ancillary details around setting up databases and messaging systems and having to go through manual deployments and so on and so forth. Having those agile environments really helps them regain some of some of that trust and some of that credibility with a broader business.
We know this is a real transition for companies too, isn't it? I mean, well, one of the things that we really hear is this complexity that comes with marrying these different platforms. So you might have an internal API development platform, for example, and you are, starting to find ways that you can extend your platform, to third-party developers, for example. We saw this with Capital One, right? We interviewed several of their engineers at South by Southwest, and they talked about this internal API lifecycle management process, where they basically had to move from like middleware environment to a REST-based API. So then they could, when they want, they're going to be able to essentially open up these endpoints essentially for these REST-based APIs. The company will be working across the same platform. It'll allow them to extend to third-party developers who may be working on Amazon Web Services, for example. Are you starting to see these kind of efforts emerge where you're starting to see these much more commercially oriented developer engagements? Just wondering, how you guys are thinking about that, because you guys talk a lot about the CIO, but there's also like this whole world of needing to connect with those developers to start building out these new ecosystems.
Right. Absolutely. I'm reminded in the younger days of the web, IT was largely an internal function, and then self-service and really having consumers be able to access those IT systems directly became a huge imperative. And I think we're seeing the same kind of wave start right now, where some of the most visionary companies are looking at some things that are competitive advantages for themselves internally and trying to figure out how they're going to wire those up as a set of APIs that they can potentially make available to third parties and create new revenue streams and really kind of transform IT from a cost center into a profit center. A company that I'm reminded of that we just talked to recently that is a customer of ours, long-standing customer of ours. They look at, for example, digital rendering as a core capability. And one of the things they really are excited to partner with us on is really creating a business out of that and being able to expose that in a robust way to a set of companies that perhaps previously were competitors, but given the fact that this company feels like it's so far ahead, they feel like this is a capability that we really want to be able to make available to others and be able to profit handsomely from. So yeah, we're absolutely seeing that.
Now let's take a quick break before we get back to the second half of the show. HPE helps some of the world's largest companies run their IT operations. The company is also making significant investments in the container ecosystem. It recently made an investment in Mesosphere, the maker of the data center operating system that orchestrates containers for both Linux and Windows. You can learn more about HPE at hpe.com. Now let's get back to the show. So I'm curious, where you are with your efforts around Eucalyptus, for example, and Staccato. Those were two acquisitions that you guys recently made in the past, year and a half or so, 2 years even. In Eucalyptus, it was always actually one of those really interesting companies that allowed you to, to actually develop these environments that connected with AWS. I'm curious on how you're seeing Eucalyptus play into this whole idea of like these extended platforms, these distributed environments.
So both were really good acquisitions for us, and I'll start with Eucalyptus. Eucalyptus, when we first got it, it was a piece of software that basically allowed a company to go stand up their own version of AWS, if you will, on their own hardware and their own data centers. And that's a very good use case, and we continue to see that, and we continue to see more and more demand for that. But the thing that we're most excited about Eucalyptus is really a couple of different scenarios. The first scenario is really when a customer has kind of a broader private cloud agenda, right? And they realize that they want to be able to go offer up the industry standard APIs, IaaS APIs, in that private cloud in an elastic fashion. right? So for example, they want to have an OpenStack resource pool, and they want to have an AWS resource pool, and maybe they want to have a VMware resource pool. They potentially even over time want to have an Azure Stack resource pool. And they want to be able to go provision those in an elastic way on top of a single set of infrastructure, as opposed to have to stand up 4 different clouds. And we see, many of our large customers are really focused now on multi-cloud. They don't think that their reality looks like a single cloud. They don't think it's a single API set. They don't think that it's only private or only public. It's going to be a hybrid of all of those things. And so some of the more interesting hardware advancements that we're making over this year, specifically around Synergy, the composable infrastructure set of offerings that we're shipping this year, go hand in glove with this notion that you want to be able to have elastic resource pools, and Eucalyptus plays a prominent role there, because more and more of our customers are telling us, we like OpenStack. We really like OpenStack because we really believe that multi-vendor open source ecosystems win out over time, and we really like your investment there. But it's really cool that you also have the ability to go offer AWS compatibility in terms of private cloud for us, and be able to run that on the same infrastructure and be able to go re-provision the resource pools in a matter of minutes as opposed to in a matter of days or weeks. That is a real differentiator. So we're very excited about Eucalyptus from that perspective, really being one of the cornerstone IaaS stacks for our private cloud. The other way that we're really excited about Eucalyptus is more and more we're seeing customers that come up to us and say, we like the notion of having AWS APIs, but we want you guys to operate it for us. And you may ask, why would somebody want to consume AWS APIs from HPE versus from Amazon? The answer tends to be focused on things like, one very, very common example is existing customers where we already run IT for them, and they say, with the SAP that you run for us and the OpenStack cluster that you run for us, we want an AWS cluster as well. And we love the fact that you operate it for us. We don't have to worry about the operations piece. We can still consume, but we know that it's isolated. We know that you're operating it for us. And it may operate in geos that are important to us, but perhaps AWS isn't in yet. And they're very excited about the fact that we can offer them API symmetry, to a reasonable extent with the AWS API set. So those are two kinds of scenarios where we feel like Eucalyptus is going to play a much more central role in our product strategy going forward.
So how does that work? How do you manage this environment for your customers?
We basically will work with them to figure out how big of a cloud they want. And we have about 80 data centers worldwide. Now, these are not hyperscale data centers that sit next to waterfalls and hydroelectric plants. These are regional data centers, and we have IT running on behalf of customers in all of those. So a customer will come to us and say, we would like to have a 10 node or 100 node or 200 node cloud that runs on Eucalyptus, and we will basically operate that software for them. Instead of having them buy the software, buy the hardware, integrate that together, run it on their own. Certainly some customers, some of our largest Eucalyptus customers continue to want to do that. But some of the newer opportunities that we see for the software are really very interested in us operating it for them.
And they're doing that, again, just to review, because they want to keep their internal infrastructure in place, but the complexity, often that comes with running on AWS and getting started with that can be challenging. Is that part of it, or what is the ease of use for them? What's the value for them?
Well, there's a lot of different reasons. Some of them, for example, I'll give a couple examples. There's a company that is in a regulated industry, and they run their front ends on AWS, and they say, you know what, we can't have the data leave our data center by law. This is a company that operates globally, but they'll even say that for, their American data centers. This is not a European, Germany regulation thing. This is just a company that has data that just literally can't leave their data center because they're in a regulated industry. And so they have to have their backends running on their own data center, and they like that API symmetry that we offer, where the front ends run in AWS, and they can scale those based on load, and the back ends all run in their data center, and that works beautifully for them. So those are some examples of customers that are very happy with that kind of hybrid approach.
Can they run Eucalyptus independently if they wish, and manage that themselves?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So the other kind of scenario that we see are customers that have existing data centers, and they want to potentially be able to burst, but again, they want to make sure that their VMs are running in an isolated fashion. They don't run next to Sony's VMs, in somebody's data center. They want to run on machines that they know are entirely dedicated to them. So basically, meeting the customer where they are has always been a strength of HPE's. And these are the kinds of scenarios where we do really well, where a customer has a very specific set of requirements, and we're able to go meet them because we have the flexibility of either helping them get set up to run their own clouds, or we can actually help them even more by running it for them.
So Eucalyptus really, works for customers who are looking to connect into AWS, which talks back to Eucalyptus roots. Staccato is a different platform, originally built on Cloud Foundry. What is the role of Staccato now for IT and developers that you're starting to talk to?
Yeah, so this one is a really great acquisition for us. Back to the title of your talk, really, which is making superheroes out of IT. Really, this is one of the foundational tools that Central IT is using to basically become relevant again in the lives of their business unit developers. They basically use Staccato as an environment where they can really they can allow developers to have a very agile experience building applications. Really, like I said before, having a Heroku-like experience for building applications and deploying them multiple times a day as opposed to quarterly. The most exciting part of it for IT is that the software really allows them to be agile with respect to where the VMs actually run. So, for example, you can go run Staccato on a set of VMs in AWS or on Azure, or you can go deploy it in a private cloud and run on a set of VMs that run on OpenStack or on Eucalyptus, for that matter. And so you retain the same developer experience, the same programming model, but then where the app actually runs is really a decision that IT can help drive. For example, we see oftentimes a set of companies that basically will stand up Staccato in AWS because it's so easy to do that. And they'll go do their dev test there in AWS, and then they'll decide that they want to go deploy that application on a production cluster that's running in-house. And sometimes you'll see almost the opposite, where you start getting the dev test sprawl, and companies start realizing our AWS bill is enormous, or our Azure bill is sizable. We need to bring that dev test activity to our private cloud, where the cycles are a lot cheaper. And then, if we want to go deploy, we can do that either in a private cloud or in a public cloud because we really like the operational characteristics, for example, of AWS. So that flexibility of being able to choose whether you deploy Staccato in a private cloud or in a public cloud, or you want us to operate for you, that's really helpful for developers. And then that notion that they have a really, really easy experience where developers can just focus on the code as opposed to focusing on packaging everything into a VM and then handing it over to IT and having IT take sometimes days, weeks longer, many weeks to go deploy that application. Going from that model to a self-service model is really what, makes them superheroes. That's really what helps them transform.
I have a question about Staccato. As we talked about as an acquisition, playing into your overall portfolio, is there anything that some of your other core services have either kind of learned from Staccato or taken from it? Because we talk a lot about how you then go and use the product that's been acquired, but
Yep.
I'm really interested in what's been learned from some of these acquisitions.
We actually, like I said, in the HPE software portfolio, we're undergoing some pretty massive transformations of our own, where we're effectively rewriting these applications from being monolithic applications to being microservice-based architectures. Mm-hmm. And in many cases, we're actually using Staccato and Cloud Foundry and Docker as the architectural principles that are underpinning those transformations. One of the things that we really loved about Staccato, and one of the things that we learned very deeply from Staccato, is the notion of bringing some of these ecosystems together. And I think I mentioned that last time we talked, Alex, where, for example, we recognize that a growing number of developers really want to package their applications as Docker containers. That's the unit of packaging and deployment that they want to reason about. And by teaching our platform, Staccato, how to basically take and run those containers and be able to go bring all the PaaS capabilities like integrated logging and monitoring, like auto scaling, like application versioning and rollback, like zero downtime deployments. All of those things are very mature capabilities, and being able to bring that to the Docker stack has been really, really good. And when we look at HP software and how they're transforming their applications, they're really learning a ton of lessons in terms of how to go build applications. The other way that we're learning is we have a sizable number of developers, tens of thousands of developers in our enterprise services group. And these developers often lead the transformation with some of our largest customers. They will come in and have effectively advisory services where they'll look at the corpus of applications that one of our customers has, and they'll go and help figure out which applications stay on premises, which applications can go to a public cloud, which applications you're not ever going to touch because there's no ROI in touching them at all, which applications, frankly, you can retire, which applications you can replace with SaaS. And where there's a call for application transformation, these enterprise services are increasingly using Staccato and our cloud native application platform as a tool for being able to be very successful at rapidly transforming those applications and really falling into the pit of success when it comes to undergoing kind of that rapid rewriting of some of those applications.
And that concludes part one of our interview with HPE's Omri Gazitt. In part two, Omri will discuss HPE's own internal API development, the concepts of cloud-native architectures, and HPE's work in integrating the Mesos platform. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for joining us on the new Stack Analysts. HPE helps some of the world's largest companies run their IT operations. The company is also making significant investments in the container ecosystem. It recently made an investment in Mesosphere, the maker of the data center operating system that orchestrates containers for both Linux and Windows. You can learn more about HPE at hpe.com. Audio editing and sound design for the new Stack Analyst podcast is provided by Broken Hours. You can find them at brokenhours.com. Thanks again, and hope to see you back at the show. Bye-bye.